Welcome to Discovering Justice. My name is Attorney Lucy Rivera, and I am your host today. This program can be viewed at www.discoveringjustice.net. Today, we have a very special guest, Chief Anthony Benedetti from the Committee for Public Counsel Services. Welcome to the program, Chief Benedetti.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. And well, my first question is about the Public Counsel Services. And what is the Public Counsel Services?
Well, the Committee for Public Counsel Services is the state agency in Massachusetts that is responsible for providing legal services to the indigent in criminal cases and in certain civil cases.
And do you only represent people that are at the Committee for Public Counsel Services of a criminal nature, or what types of cases does CPCS cover?
Well, the Committee for Public Counsel Services was established back in 1984, and we are responsible for representing people who are, again, charged with a criminal offense and in certain civil offenses. And those are based on both constitutional law and statutory law. Many of the viewers might be familiar with the Gideon v. Wainwright case. The Gideon case was decided back in the 1960s, where the court held that someone who was indigent and could not afford their lawyer would be entitled to a lawyer, and the state would have to pay for that lawyer. On the civil side, those are also a constitutional and statutory right.
Okay, very interesting. The Committee for Public Counsel Services is a body who covers civil and criminal cases.
That's right.
And on the civil cases, you indicated that there's something for child's chins, and would you go explain to our viewers what those civil services comprehend?
Certainly. The civil areas where we provide representation, there are two which are essentially handled by the Department of Children and Families, and those are care and protection cases and CHINS, Children in Need of Services cases. The care and protection cases are situations where the government feels that a child has been abused or mistreated by a parent or a guardian. So what will happen is the state will sometimes go in and remove a child from the home. We would represent, again, assuming that the person was indigent, we would represent the child, which in most cases the child is always indigent, and we would represent the parent or the guardian. Sometimes if one parent is blaming another parent, we would represent in those situations both parents. Children in need of services, that is where a parent or a guardian or a school official or a police officer feels that a child is out of control. And those can be situations where a child is misbehaving and the parent doesn't feel like he or she can manage the child. If the child is continuously truant from school, the school official will file a CHINS petition. Generally, it is a cry for help to the court, asking the court to weigh in and try and help the party manage the child.
Very interesting, and that's the civil side. And tell us about, as far as the criminal aspect of the Committee for Public Counsel Services, what types of crimes are you, as a committee, involved with representing the clients?
Well, we would represent somebody in any type of criminal situation where they are facing jail time. If you are charged with a crime and the potential penalty involves jail time, then you are entitled to an attorney. Again, if you are indigent.
Okay, so when you say indigent, what does that mean for the people that are watching?
People who essentially are poor and cannot afford an attorney. The whole basis behind the Gideon case, if I had to wrap it up in a few words, would be that there should be a level playing field. We want to put the person who is poor and cannot afford an attorney or cannot afford any of the other things that are involved in a criminal case, such as an expert witness, a doctor, an investigator, an interpreter, that sort of thing. We want to put that person on the level playing field as someone who can afford those services.
I see, and when you talk about the Gideon case, is the Gideon versus Wayne case that describes that people have the right for an attorney.
That's right. That's right. The one other area that I didn't mention with respect to civil representation are mental health proceedings.
Yes.
Those are situations where if the government wants to lock you up or they want to administer antipsychotic drugs, then you are entitled to an attorney to represent your interests. These are cases which involve the government trying to take away a liberty interest. And the government cannot just lock you up because of a mental illness, or they cannot lock you up because you have an alcohol or drug addiction, or because they want to they can't just administer antipsychotic drugs. You have the right to an attorney to represent your interests. Yes,
that's true, and it's good to know that the Committee for Public Counsel Services encompasses all the services, including mental health. Tell us, what is the difference between the Committee for Public Counsel Services attorney versus say, for example, a district counsel, district attorney, assistant district attorney?
That's a good question. The difference is really like comparing an apple to an orange.
Yeah.
The district attorney, their role, and it's a vital role, is to represent the state in an attempt to prosecute somebody who has allegedly committed a crime. And the district attorney or an assistant district attorney works with law enforcement. They work with local police. They work with state police. In some instances, they work with federal law enforcement to put the case together, to gather the evidence, and then go to court and present the evidence. The public defender or the defense attorney comes on the scene once the case gets to court primarily. So when an individual is brought to court, they've been arrested, they're being arraigned, that's when a public defender would be appointed by the court.
And what is a public defender all about? Is it a dangerous job? Is it interesting?
It's been a while since I've been in the courtroom, but I don't think it has changed too much. It is a fascinating job. It is exciting. You never know what's going to happen from day to day. You're in court representing people who, in many cases, have absolutely nobody else to stand up for them. And you are their voice. And you are trying to make sure that the government meets their burden, and it is a high burden, beyond a reasonable doubt. So you are there to make sure that the government meets that burden, follows the rules, plays by the rules, and that the person you're representing, his or her story, is told.
Well, in this perspective, the public defenders have a really important job, not only that, but a lot of responsibility. So what is their pay like?
It's not very high. Our staff attorneys, in Massachusetts, we have a system where we use staff attorneys who are employees of the state, and we use private attorneys. There are approximately 3,000 private attorneys who decide that they want to be involved in this program, and they take cases. Our staff attorneys, the average pay is a little over $55,000. Now that includes attorneys who are right out of law school, all the way up to attorneys who have years of experience and are supervisors or office heads or have a particular expertise in a particular practice area. And on the private side, the private attorneys, they are paid depending upon the type of case and hourly rate. If it is a district court case or one of the civil cases, children and family law, which are CHINs and care and protection, they are paid $50 an hour. If you practice in Superior Court, which essentially in the more serious cases, the felonies, that is $60 an hour. And if you represent somebody who is charged with murder, that is $100 an hour. Most of the private attorneys do this as a portion of their practice. And it's important to remember that the $50 an hour, the $60 an hour, and the $100 an hour, that does not include all of the costs that go into running a law practice. These are private attorneys who are running, renting space, buying supplies, buying insurance. So it's not a very high rate.
Oh, very interesting. And I agree that there's a lot to it, and there's a lot of responsibility with it. But there's also a perception that if you're a public defender or if you're on the list taking public cases, you are not a good attorney. You're a bad attorney. You're defending people accused of crime. Why is that perception?
Well, that's a good question, Lucy. I think that one of the main reasons that perception exists is because of pop culture and the way public defenders are portrayed in television shows and movies. Some of your audience may remember a show which always sticks in my craw because they always talked poorly about public defenders, and that was NYPD Blue. You always had the police officers talking about how overworked and unprepared the public defenders were and almost making a joke. That is not how it is in Massachusetts. We have a wonderful system, dedicated, talented attorneys. In Massachusetts, we are known nationwide for our program, and most of the reason for that is the training we do for the staff and the private attorneys, the oversight, making sure that attorneys, whether they're public or private, are doing a good job, that they're doing all of the things that they need to be doing to properly represent an individual. We make sure that we provide continuing legal education. We have performance standards. So it is not like it is in as portrayed in pop culture, but they do a wonderful job in Massachusetts.
In fact, Committee for Public Counsel Services has been lauded as a model. Or how is it different in other states?
Well, as I said, one of the main reasons are the training, the performance standards, where we make sure that attorneys are doing the things they need to do. There is a process now that goes on called recertification, where periodically we will check the work some of the private attorneys are doing to make sure they're doing a good job. The training. So there are just things that we do in Massachusetts. Caseloads is one of the big reasons. In Massachusetts, we stay on top of caseloads, so unlike in other states, you don't have so many cases that you're not able to do a good job spending the time with the client.
Okay. But what you've described is a lot of responsibility on this attorneys, and also I imagine dealing with the clients and the system, the judge. Why would the pay that you described, even for attorneys who are private attorneys, why would anyone do it? Why would you want to have this job?
Because it is, every day, as I said, is fascinating, and you're helping people. It's a belief in justice, a commitment to justice, and a belief that no matter what your economic situation, whether you're rich or poor, you deserve your day in court, and we should be treating everybody the same. Okay.
That's really, and I agree, and that's under the Constitution. That's one of the rights, the Sixth Amendment in the Massachusetts Constitution, the right to a public counsel, a right to an attorney if you're facing incarceration. Chief Benedetti, what is your job at the Committee for Public Counsel Services? Does it involve policy making, and is that what you see yourself in your role at the Committee for Public Counsel Services as Chief Counsel?
Well, currently I'm the Chief Counsel, as you said, and prior to that, after I was a public defender practicing in court, representing individuals in court for a number of years, and then I was the General Counsel of the agency. So I've been at the agency in a number of different roles. The agency does get involved in policy issues. We are often, year after year, asked by the legislature and the executive branch to weigh in on pending legislation. We're looked upon as experts because we are in the courts on a day-to-day basis, and so we can bring to the table how a proposal will work in the real world, just as the district attorneys and other law enforcement agencies are asked for their perspective on legislation. So we do play a vital role in the policy side of things.
And that's important to have that perspective.
Exactly, it is.
And speaking of public policy, I would really like it if you would talk to us a little bit about the collateral consequences. For example, when there's been talk in the legislature about adding consequences in addition to the ones that are already in place when someone's sentenced, and the collateral consequences about it. What are collateral consequences? How do they affect people? And what are the additional consequences beyond what we already have?
Well, generally, collateral consequences are civil penalties that, as a result of your guilty finding, and that can be as a result of a guilty finding after trial or someone has pled guilty, you are subject to other sorts of penalties that, and these can be from state legislation or federal legislation, you end up being subject to these penalties. And I think some good examples are losing the opportunity to vote, losing the ability to get student loans so that you can't get money to go to school, Public housing. We hear so many stories about families who may have a child who gets caught selling drugs. Well, it's not just the child who suffers, but the entire family can be removed from public housing. So it's an example of how, I mean, people do something wrong, the justice system finds that they are guilty, they serve their punishment, but what happens is these collateral consequences end up continually punishing these people, and it impedes their ability to improve their life and get on with their life after their criminal conviction. They're not able to go to school, they're not able to get a job, they're not able to find housing. And so it is a real problem.
I understand. Some of the collateral consequences that you just mentioned are, for instance, the loss of a driver's license when you're convicted of a drug offense, for example.
That's right.
And what you're referring to is exactly that when you lose your license, then it follows you for however how many years, depending on what, and that's affecting your life and your ability to be able to integrate to society.
Exactly, and in many instances, the collateral consequence that you suffer isn't even connected to the crime that you commit.
Yes, that's correct, and so we're learning a lot from the Committee for Public Counsel Services and about all the work that they do in terms of protecting people with no money allegedly accused of crime and in civil offenses. I want to remind everybody that you are watching Discovering Justice. My name is Lucy Rivera, and I am the host of this program. Our program can be viewed at www.discoveringjustice.net. And today, if you have just joined us, our guest is Chief Counsel Anthony Benedetti, Chief of the Committee Public Counsel Services. So Chief Benedetti, what attracted you as a career to be a public defender? When you were growing up, you said, I want to be a public defender.
Well, it certainly is an opportunity to get into court and litigate. And that certainly was part of it. But as far back as I can remember, when I was a kid in school, I always had a problem when I thought that there was some sort of injustice. When a friend of mine, or even someone who I didn't know in school, was getting bullied, it always bothered me. And that's essentially what you're doing as a public defender. You're representing somebody that nobody likes. I mean, we represent people who, in some instances, are charged with some horrible crimes. The accusations are horrible, and everybody's visceral reaction is negative. And you go in there and you make sure that you slow the process down, and you make sure that this person is treated like everyone else in our justice system, fairly, appropriately, and that all the steps are taken, and that the government meets its burden of proof before the person is punished for their crime.
And it's a very important work, and there is that perception of negativity, but if we do remember, this right stems from even John Adams when he represented the British soldiers, and it's inherent in our culture and in our society to have a public counsel. So it is really important that we have this agency in Massachusetts.
Exactly, and you mentioned John Adams, and think about in today's climate, if someone like John Adams representing the British who had killed Americans, think of the press that John Adams would get today. It would not be positive.
Don't forget he became president.
That's right.
Chief Benedetti, you had a quote that you wanted to read to the audience, which I find to be inspirational.
Well, certainly, I think it does help explain why people choose to do the work of a public defender, and I found it, and I really think it hits home. It's by a federal public defender in Illinois, Carol Brook. So you want to be a public defender. Don't do it for the money. There isn't enough. Don't do it for prestige. You won't get any. Don't do it for the thrill of victory. Victory rarely comes. Do it for love. Do it for justice. Do it for self-respect. Do it for the satisfaction of knowing you are serving others, defending the Constitution, living your ideals. The work is hard. The law is against you. The facts are against you. The judges are often against you. Sometimes even your clients are against you. But it is a great job, exhilarating, energizing, rewarding. You get to touch people's hearts and fight for what you believe in every day. I really think that captures it.
I think that is extremely inspirational, and I think that just if there are any law students out there, they all want to go to the Committee for Public Counsel Services now.
I hope so.
If there are people who have no money and they do need representation, how do they go about getting an attorney?
Well, they would inform the court when they went to court that they want an attorney, and they would tell the court that they are poor, indigent, and what happens is the court will look into their economic resources. They will look at how much money do they make, do they have a job, how much income do they bring in on a monthly basis, and they'll look at what sorts of assets do they have. They'll look at what expenses they have, what are their monthly bills, how much do they pay for food, for rent, for clothing, do they have any dependents, and then there'll be a recommendation as to whether or not an individual is indigent and does have a right to an attorney.
Okay. So I do have a note that we have 2 minutes, so I just want to make sure that you are able to tell us all the recap the services that the Committee for Public Counsel Services offers civilly and criminally. I know there's a appellate panel and a criminal district superior. And maybe also, how can they reach you? Is there a website or a phone number?
Yes, our
for the committee?
Our website is publiccounsel.net, where we can be reached by going to www.publiccounsel.net. We represent people, as I said, charged in criminal cases.
Right.
We represent people in the children and family law cases, in the mental health cases. We represent people, we represent sex offenders, people who have to register sexually dangerous persons. So we represent people in a wide range of services where either, again, they are constitutionally or statutorily mandated. And when I say statutorily, I mean the legislature has made a decision that there is enough at risk that an individual has the right to an attorney.
Very, very well said, and that's our law in the United States. And well, our time has come to an end, Chief Benedetti, but we are extremely thrilled and happy and excited that you were able to join us to discuss the important work that you're doing and the important work of the Committee for Public Counsel Services.
Well, it's been a pleasure being here. Thank you.
And for our viewers, thank you so much for your time. And you have just seen another episode of Discovering Justice. This program will be online at www.discoverinjustice.net. I am your host, Lucy Rivera, and you can always reach me at lucinda.rivera@discoverinjustice.net. And please let us know if you'd like to hear more about this program or if you'd like to hear about any other topics. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, Chief Benedetti, for your time, and thank you all of you for watching us.